and welcome to the class on co-creation and user innovation. In this class, basically, we're going to look at how other people are important for our creative process and for the way in which we innovate, the role of others. Before we start, we should acknowledge, though, the other side of the coin, which is the importance of solitude, of working alone. So this is a passage from Storr from 1988, and he said, "It is widely believed that interpersonal relationships of an intimate kind are the chief, if not the only, source of human happiness. Yet the lives of creative individuals often seem to run counter to this assumption. For example, many of the world's greatest thinkers have not reared families or formed close personal ties. Thinking is predominantly a solitary activity, although others may be present when an individual is concentrating upon his own thoughts. Learning, thinking, innovation, and maintaining contact with one's own inner world are all facilitated by solitude." This is an interesting perspective, and I think many of us can resonate with the fact that we might get our best ideas, as it were, most creative ideas, when we're alone, when we're away from others, we're away from the noise and turbulence of social contact. Yeah. At the same time, what I will try to demonstrate with this lecture is that even when we are alone, we're not in an asocial state of mind. We are still part of a society, and we still work with the ideas, knowledge, and perspective of other people. So if we look at the many ways and the many others involved in creativity, the many ways they impact creativity, we have a huge vocabulary of, starting from concrete others like friends and parents and teachers and so on, to the mechanisms through which they shape creativity, through feedback, giving us inspiration, sometimes even through competition. In this lecture, I'm going to try to place a bit of order in this very broad category of how other people impact creativity and innovation. And to do that, we have to first answer or think about this question: why is creativity a social phenomenon? Again, this doesn't mean that it is not an individual phenomenon. Of course, individuals create and innovate, but they do it in a very social manner. And there are at least 4 reasons for this, and of course I would love for you to think of others and more than this. But basically, we create in collaboration with other people. Creativity is validated by others. We create based on the work of others, and we create with other people in mind, even when we are alone. So let's start with the first idea. We create in collaboration. The reality of our lives, from family to school to work lives, is that we do have to work in groups. We have to collaborate with others. We do it on a daily basis. We interact with people as part of the many, many groups we belong to. Creative acts rely on both visible and explicit forms of collaboration when you actually work in a group, but also more subtle or indirect forms of collaboration. Imagine, for instance, mediated collaboration when you actually communicate through Skype or online or through messages. You have a connection, but it's not as immediate as being in the presence of other people. Even more, think about when people are absent, but yet you know their perspective, you build on their knowledge, you read books that influence your thinking a lot and the way you become creative, but the authors of the book are not there with you. Understanding this, Barron proposed a very interesting notion. He had the title of one of his chapters called "All Creativity is Collaboration." We always collaborate with visible, present, or implicit or internalized others. The second way of understanding the importance of other people for creativity is to look at how they validate our creative expression. So any creative artifact we produce, whether it is an object, an idea, a process, needs to be socialized, needs to be integrated in a cultural system of existing artifacts. And it is only integrated by social interaction and by persuading others to validate, to accept your product as creative. No creative act is actually complete without being acknowledged, recognized, valued, and finally used by other people. If we go back to Csikszentmihalyi, the author we mentioned in a previous lecture on models of creativity, he's one of the fathers of the systemic view of creativity. So he obviously understood the importance of audiences for recognizing creativity. In fact, for him, creativity cannot be reduced to the producer or the creator, but it is constantly constructed in the relationship, in the interaction between producer, who is making, proposing something, and the audience, who is receiving and integrating that novelty. We also create based on the work of other people. So creativity doesn't come out of nowhere. It reuses existing cultural materials, both actual materials like technology and laptops, the computer you're using to, or the phone you're using to listen to this, and symbolic materials like language and ideas that were created by others and proposed by others. Becker, in the context of the art world, talked about how creative artifacts often result out of a collaboration, a cooperation between people, and division of labor. So when more people, through their work, produce the means you're using to create, your laptop, your phone, even an isolated poem, a poet creating with just a piece of paper and a pencil, we all depend on the invisible division of labor in society that produced that laptop, that paper, or that pencil. Another interesting angle here is offered by Schwader, who talked about intentional worlds and the fact that we live in worlds in which products are inscribed with the intentionality of the people who made them. So the makers of a chair made the chair in such a way that it really invites us to sit on the chair, right? To use it in that manner. So all our material objects are actually impregnated by the intentions and the expectations and the vision of their makers. So there is a deep social connection there. And we are going to actually come back to that, to this particular issue, when we talk about materiality and creativity. And finally, and most powerfully, we create with other people in mind. This is what many call dialogicality, which is this view that the way we create knowledge is an inherently social dialogical process, meaning that we're always in dialogue when we think with the views and knowledge and perspective of others. When you are going to create the final project for the course, when you write an essay for this course or others, while you're writing, you often put yourself in the position of the one who's going to read the essay. In this case, it might be me if it's an essay for this course. So you're constantly thinking, what would the other person say? You're constantly trying to look at what you do from the perspective of others, and that's a big engine of creativity and innovation. John Dewey had a beautiful way of expressing this. In 1934, he referred to doing art as a continuous internal dialogue with other people. He said, even when the artist works in solitude, all three terms are present: work, artist, and audience. The work is there in progress, and the artist has to become vicariously the receiving audience. He can speak only as his work appeals to him as one spoken to through what he perceived. He observes and understands as a third person might note and interpret. What does he mean here? So he means basically that when you're an artist, and if many of you paint or produce things that are artistic, you might notice that you are immersed in the process of making, and then all of a sudden you stand back and you look at what you've done. You become an audience to what you actually created. And you alternate in the process of making art or creating anything between these two positions of the one doing and the one observing. And when you observe, you're in this very social relation. You observe through your eyes as another person, your mother, father, colleague, the general public, a generic other might observe. So creativity is really grounded in dialogues. What about innovation? Well, there is a lot of work today on user innovation. It's been coming up for a number of decades now, which is this idea that customers and audiences are involved as co-creators of objects and blurring the line between what we traditionally see as creators as different from users. Users can and are involved at different stages of conceiving a new product or finding new ways of using an existing product or using it in new contexts. You see today on social media so many examples of people who do interesting stuff, unexpected stuff, with very traditional products, from a coffee mug to a skateboard and so on. And in many ways, these companies are also watching and they're trying to capitalize on this big co-creative energy of people. This process can be accidental. You discover a new use and you start using an object in a new way, or deliberate. Many companies actually today try to harness their users' creativity. If you look at Lego, for instance, they have a website and a whole program dedicated to create and share, meaning that uh, users of Lego are invited to create their own models and then share them with the community. And of course, the company is watching there. So it's empowering users to become identifiable creators of different Lego models. At the same time, if you look at the industry of creating apps, many smartphone companies and producers of software for smartphones very much open this to a market of people who are going to create their own apps. So use their own creativity to have other people basically become hooked to using their phone, using their smartphone. And it is an example of how user innovation informs this industry. And last but not least, I want to bring to your attention the idea of citizen science, which is an interesting area in which basically citizens become scientists or become part of the process of science. They're part of constructing and communicating explanations, asking questions, analyzing data, collecting data, making observations, and planning and carrying out an investigation. So every person can collect data. If you're an astrophysicist or someone who studies plants or animals, you cannot be at every moment in time in every corner of the forest or corner of the earth. And you will depend, perhaps, on other people making the observations for you. And these other people can bring their own criteria and knowledge to what they collect. So citizens becoming scientists is a very interesting way of thinking about user innovation. Last but not least, I want to talk about the danger of romanticizing the social. I'm not proposing here that the fact that others can facilitate creative activity means that their influence is always positive. More people, the better. Add more people to a group and they're going to be more creative. Obviously not. I think we all know and we can think of situations in which other people basically disrupt or even inhibit our creative work. So what is the argument? The argument is that sharing and working with others is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have many more ideas to choose for, you have a wider set of knowledge, and this is very much important for creativity. But on the other hand, you also increase the chances of conflict, of free riding, people taking advantage of the ideas of others and not contributing. You have a list of these phenomena in the exercise for this week, which focuses you on brainstorming, creating ideas with others, right? And you will notice there that brainstorming can be very effective, but also very ineffective. So what is the argument? The argument is that, yes, we shouldn't romanticize certain social relations and contexts. They can contribute to increasing or decreasing our creativity and innovation, but at the end of the day, the social relations are what constitutes the natural state, the basis of creating and innovating. We cannot begin to imagine creating or innovating outside of this network of connections with other people, as I hope I demonstrated in this short talk. So to summarize, creativity and innovation are at all times social or relational types of phenomena. Obviously, this doesn't mean that they're not individual or psychological, but the individual and the psychological is actually impregnated by the social. We are, after all, social beings. We create in collaboration with other people, based on the work of others, and constantly in dialogue, internal and external, with their ideas. And I think user innovation demonstrates this in a vivid and active way, the fact that social forms of creativity can bring value to both individuals and companies.